Hello, I'm Ben Dailey, and welcome to my Fed Talk on how Thor fought giants with a cross. As a preface, there's nothing wrong with Christianity that is not present in any other world religion. Any digging into the history of a religion shows everyone can be blamed for similar faults, and no one is inherently better than the other. There's also nothing wrong with worshiping any religion. Simply acknowledging the reality of its history should not be seen as an offense or an attack against that religion. Suggesting that it is, or that one should even go as far as to cover up the truth of the reality, is the only wrongdoing. It is crucial that everyone should have access to and should know the history of the elements that shaped our world so that we may learn from it and have the knowledge necessary to know how to go forward, shaping our future. There's never been a serious world religion spread through one party showing unmoving righteousness and moral superiority and the other showing gracious submission. While this is a common story to provide comfort to those who practice them, it cannot be farther from the truth. Christianity today is the largest major religion with 2.2 billion worshippers spread across every corner of the globe. However, much like every major power that the world has seen, Christianity did not start with such prominence in the world, but instead began humbly and over time slowly took the world by storm. While the means of which Christianity used to plant itself all over the earth are countless, the more dramatic ones are generally known. Some brought rapid change, such as the Crusades, Catholicism's foundation in Central and South America, and the unprecedented expansion of the British Empire, all of which ensured Christianity had a foothold in the world, and those impacted by it could not gain the power necessary to throw off Christianity's balance. Others brought change through immersion into global powers, such as the Romans' conversion from a polytheistic and traditional mythology, going back to its foundations as a small kingdom on a seemingly insignificant peninsula in southern Europe, over to a relatively infant religion to come out of the outer providence of the Roman Empire. What's not as generally known are the small, regional, and subtle changes made as it spread to lay down kindling and were used as a basis to burn down the customs of the regions and implement the word of Christ into these regions, with a focus on the conversion methods used on the Northern European, Germanic, and Scandinavian people. To understand why someone acts, it is important to know how they got there in the first place. However, mercy will be displayed here because the overall history and the origin of Christianity is enough for its own Fed Talk, and its history has enough basis in common knowledge that to go into detail about the beginning becomes irrelevant to the topic at hand. Christianity began in a southern province of the Roman Empire known as Judea as a branch of Judaism. All that's necessary here is that the belief in Judaism that one day a person will appear, known as the Messiah, and save the Jewish people by claiming their sacred land of Canaan and construct a holy temple for them. A man by the name of Jesus of Nazareth claimed to be the Messiah, and his claim caused a schism in the Jewish world. Jesus lacked the traits promised, such as being a warrior, and he neither claimed land or constructed a temple. However, those who believed in Jesus being the Messiah became the first Christians, and Jesus' martyrdom through his execution by the Romans inspired perseverance in his followers. Over the following decades, Christianity slowly built up its power within the Roman Empire until 312 CE, when Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity, shifting the state religion from its traditionally polytheistic mythology to Christianity. After that, Christianity became near synonymous with the largest power in Europe. And just as the Roman Empire expanded across Europe, Christianity spread with it, going 55 BCE with Julius Caesar taking over the British Isle, and with the province of Britain forming in 43 CE, a Roman presence in Northern Europe existed long before Christianity became the state religion. By the time of the empire's conversion to Christianity, Britain was securely under Roman control and soon became a Christian island. Even after the Romans left and the city of Rome was sacked, and by the time of Charlemagne's conquest of continental Europe, Christianity remained on the British Isle. As a result, any people who went to and from the British Isle were exposed to Christianity and carried it with them. That's where the Vikings come in. The Vikings were warring, seafaring nomads who sailed from coast to coast, pillaging and founding their own cities, who frequently invaded villages and monasteries in Britain and eventually formed some settlements. As a result, eventually you had a combination of English monks and missionaries and converted Vikings going back to the regions of Europe the Vikings originated from, and from where the pagan mythology lived. This pagan mythology was able to survive the dark ages of Europe by a technicality by being seen as nothing more than myths by the religious officials instead of an entire religion that would conflict with Christianity. And what we do know of these myths comes from surviving art and mostly a couple sagas of stories compiled together. Most of what we know of the actual religion itself and its customs can be inferred from what the myths tell us and from any physical remains of religious practices in archaeological sites or in the text of others who knew of the religious customs. The myths that we have themselves are just stories and legends about gods and heroes and monsters. These myths stand as an example of an ancient culture living through Christian Europe in the Middle Ages, However, they are filled with Christian imagery, since it was most likely modified to either possibly adapt pagan culture to be more embracing of Christianity, or as a means to preserve pagan stories and prevent their eradication from history. While many characteristics of myth are shared across cultures with no interaction, such as the first pair of humans in floods and/or origin from water, it becomes more interesting when cultures conquered by one start showing characteristics key in their conqueror's culture. It isn't common to find key figures in mythology strung up, hanged, or crucified, and to have them resurrected after a relatively short period of time. But oddly enough, the great Odin achieved his infinite knowledge of the world by sacrificing himself to the world tree Yggdrasil, hanging himself on its branches, and stabbing himself with his magic spear Gungnir for 9 days until he's brought back to life with even more power than before. And since one can never truly have enough Jesus, why stop at just one representation of his actions? The god Balder, god of light, was the nicest, most handsome, and beloved god amongst the gods of Asgard. Only one being had ill will against him, that being the trickster Loki, and more or less coming from his endless desire to cause mischief and evil rather than out of hatred for the god himself. However, one day Balder's mother and Odin's wife Frigg heard a prophecy that foretold the end of the world, Ragnarok, would begin with the death of her son Balder. In order to save him, she had every animal, person, and substance in the world swear to never harm the god, all except the little mistletoe, who was too frail and weak to cause him harm as Frigg had assumed. Loki, disguised as a hag, asked Frigg if she'd asked everything in the world to swear to never harm Balder, and she proudly boasted yes to everything all except mistletoe. Loki took advantage of this and crafted a sharp dart from it and the twig it grew from, and gave it to the blind god Hod to throw in a game where people threw anything at Balder, trying to see if anything harmed the god, but everything harmlessly bounced off, much to the amusement of Balder and the gods. Loki guided Hod's hand and struck Balder down with the dart, and declared Hod killed him, and immediately killed Hod in revenge. Being that these myths are all a part of one story, and this continues on into the end of the world, as said by the prophet to Frigg. But the point is how the most beloved god, son of the All-Father Odin, god of radiating light, was killed and journeyed to the Norse underworld known as Hel, and returned only after the end of the world fought out by the forces of Hel and the gods. Other similarities can be seen in the Norse's most popular god, Thor, whose iron hammer swiftly struck down enemies of the gods with fierce bolts of lightning. Vikings looked to Thor for protection and prayed to him and Odin for victory in battle, and carried hammer-shaped pendants on them at all times. Vikings have been found buried with them, and battlefields have had hammer pendants found buried in them. Similar to the Viking pendant, Christian missionaries wore crosses with them and buried their dead under crosses, and similar to the hammer, the cross was worn for religious rituals held. As time progressed, Christians were able to blend the cross more and more into the imagery of Thor until that people would adorn Christian iconography just as commonly as they did with Thor. It should be worth mentioning that Thor fought his nemesis Jormungandr, the world serpent, with his hammer, so not only is the great symbol of this god being used and converted to a cross, but it is also being used as a weapon to fight a snake, a common symbol of evil and corruption in Christianity. Further suppression of pagan customs with Thor can be seen with the cutting down of Thor's oak. An ancient and mighty oak tree, sacred to the thunder god, was cut down and used to build a church. And according to Christian retellings, had the Nordic people present convert on the spot after seeing Thor not immediately strike down the Christian monk who cut down the tree. The cutting down of Thor's oak was one of the earliest signs of Christianity's conversion of Europe and became a sign of things to come, with Christianity slowly removing and converting the pagan mythology over to fit and accompany the Christian customs. While many attribute Christianity's spread to the violence and acts such as the Crusades and Reconquista, instances such as with the Norse show how Christianity could and did spread in more peaceful ways, albeit through suppression of local cultures and customs, but still in an interesting way by working with the present cultures and adapting it to fit theirs. Even then, not everything was lost from the Norse. Most days of the week, from Monday through Friday, all coming from Norse names, and with most Christian holidays being celebrated on Norse holidays, with Jesus' birthday being realistically in June, but having the celebration moved to December in order to adapt a festival made to celebrate the rebirth of the Son to fit Christianity and help convert the people to Christianity. Even to this day, Christianity preserves pagan cultures and customs, such as the ones mentioned, despite conquering and converting the people there centuries ago. Thank you for coming to my Fed Talk.